Bobby, can you hear and see us all right?
Yes, I can. Hello,
I
everybody.
can hear you.
Is everybody blurry? Is that my vision? Right.
Bobby, could you say something one more time for us?
Hello, hello, hello.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My whisper.
Okay. Chair Freedy.
Okay, so I am not experienced in being the chair of committees, so I will rely on help from the team to keep me on the right path. But I do know that we're here to have the meeting of the voter approved tax oversight committee. And if the staff could call the roll.
Absolutely. Member Broadman. Present. Chair Freedy.
I'm here.
Member McWaters.
Present.
And Member Roth is absent.
So 3 out of 5, which does make a quorum. Okay. So I think we need to address how public comments will work for those who may be online or calling in either way. Could you give the highlights of how that works this evening?
Thank you, Chair Freedy. This meeting tonight is being recorded and streamed live on Zoom. Members of the public can provide public comment by phone by calling 669-444-9171 using the meeting ID 873-363-5857# and pressing *9 to raise your hand for comment. Or you can comment and watch directly through Zoom using the link on the agenda and use the raise hand feature through Zoom. If you experience any technical difficulties, please email claire.holman@cityofsanrafael.org. You will have 2 minutes to provide your comments once unmuted. We're offering closed captioning for this evening's meeting on Zoom. Select the live transcript button on Zoom to enable this feature. At this time, I see no members of the public.
Okay. So I think our first item is to review and approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to see and review the minutes? Yep. So we need someone to motion for approval.
Approval.
I'll second. So we need a roll call of those present to approve.
Vice Chair Broadman. I approve. Chair Freedy.
I approve.
Member McWaters.
I approve.
3 in favor.
Okay.
So motion passes.
Okay. If there are people online, are there any comments from the public on topics that are not on the agenda?
At this time, so make sure I'm not. To comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. To comment by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And once you've heard the notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Each speaker has 2 minutes to provide public comment and will be muted once time has elapsed. At this time, I see no members of the public or public comments.
Okay. So the primary item on the agenda right now is the staff reports, the presentation of the unaudited financials from fiscal 23, as well as the budget for fiscal 24. Does that mean that staff will be reviewing the highlights and then the committee will ask questions?
Absolutely.
Can I assume that we will go through one by one and pause for questions as opposed to having them all? Okay, so we have 4 different measures we're reviewing. One is extremely easy, and the other 3 are of differing levels of detail. So we should be able to get through all of them. I hope at a decent pace, but let's dive in.
Right. Before kind of hand it off to Juan, our finance manager, who's put together the information and the backup, I just wanted to kind of set the table real quick on a couple of things. First is thank you for serving on the committee. And my understanding is that this is the second meeting of this newly constituted committee following a period where several voter approved measures had their own oversights committee, so it's been consolidated. I would just say that 2 things. One is based on feedback tonight and going forward, as I said earlier, we're very interested in again, supporting the committee and fulfilling your roles and responsibilities as laid out in your charter. And if there's additional information, presentation, however you would like to see that, within reason, because we can provide everything and anything. But also want to make sure that it fits what your needs are. So we're still talking internally about what the best way is to do that. I also will note that what you have in front of you is unaudited results through the fiscal year ended June 30. My understanding is that there's already, and we'll talk at the end of the meeting, but there's another meeting contemplated to review sort of audited financial report results, such that the required annual report of the committee to the council and the public is based on final audited results. So I think, at least for me, this meeting also serves as kind of like a preview of the results, and we can discuss it. And if there's any additional information that the committee wishes to see or wants to see a slightly different presentation, we'd be happy to incorporate that into follow-up to it.
What's the major difference between the audited and unaudited?
Well, I'll take a
Depends.
first stab at that. Well,
Yeah.
in this context, these are different fiscal years.
Of course,
So-
with this one, but between this meeting and the
No, the
follow-on.
audited is, so I guess, I'm not the accountant in the room, thank God, but, basically, we do the year, financials. We actually close the financials every month, right, through fiscal year from, July 1st to June 30. Then we kind of do a year-end close, do a bunch of reconciliations, adjustments, and then, in fact, we're right in the middle, well, starting the next phase of the audit, where we provide all of the trial balances and financial statements and notes to the financial statements to the auditors. Once we go through the audit, if they identify issues or areas that they either recommend or require us to make adjustments to, they will do that. So not sure, frankly, how much, if at all, some of these numbers will change. Because they're looking at the entire city. But for instance, you'll have an example might be that, okay, revenue that was from last year that we didn't receive until September, is it booked in this fiscal year, or should it be accrued back to that fiscal? So there's mostly timing issues,
Okay.
classification issues, but the audited results basically means that the auditor has reviewed the account financials and put their opinion to it.
Sure.
Could I ask, or could I assume that
Yeah.
the next meeting, we would see statements that might show, here were the unaudited numbers as we see them now, and then next to it, a column of final approved audited numbers, and then a variance column that would show any differences if there were any?
We can provide that,
That
absolutely.
would be great.
I mean, just in case, it draws your eyes to what changed, if there were any
Yeah,
changes.
And I
And
think,
audits don't always result in changes, they don't.
so I think a corollary to that is, and there may be some exceptions because there's still few things, but we're not changing any of the numbers at this point. So really any changes are going to be based on the auditor's review and questions that they ask. And then we'll, hopefully agree on what adjustments will be made. But one way or another, you will absolutely be able to highlight any changes to the audit. I also had noticed, well, maybe there's a question earlier, which we'd even talked about it. If this was put together, sometimes it's helpful to show the budget next to the audited results, so that particularly on the revenues, you can see whether they're coming in as planned or over and under. So that's something I think that we might be adding anyway, but would be helpful. Yeah, with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Sean, because I'm in the process of learning as well, and actually have an entire folder, starting to vote just on the city's voter approved tax measures and the ballot language and what was presented at the time that they went to the voters, et cetera. But this is your meeting, and we're here to support you, and I'm gonna hand it over to Sean.
All right, thank you, thank you. So I'll start it off with Measure D, library special tax. So as you can see, a small kind of 2% growth, which in revenues, which would kind of be what you expect, but actually citywide, we're seeing more like 5% with the hot housing market and all, assessed valuations increasing. What's drawing that number down, see down below, is the senior exemption. It's kind of unique to this fund. is that the growth in property taxes is lower than you see in the rest of the in property taxes as a whole.
Is this tax in fact based on the assessed value of the property as opposed to being a flat parcel tax?
It is a parcel tax. I understand.
That's a good question.
No, it is, yeah. I don't think we're allowed to do an ad valorem
Oh,
tax
okay, okay.
anymore.
Oh, commercial, yeah.
Well, there's multi-unit. There's kind of a little bit of tiering based on single unit versus multi-unit.
All right, well, anyway,
Okay, so changes in assessed value would not affect
in
the
fact,
revenue. Changes in the
this
number
is,
of senior exemptions would.
$59 per parcel.
Commercial is taxed different.
would be on school footage.
Yeah.
Yes, still not valuation based, so it's based on square footage versus parcel base. The library tax is adjusted annually, in June. I believe. And so that typically will increase by a small amount, but then that's often offset by those senior exemptions. So as the number of seniors rise, who apply for those exemptions, that will.
Okay. Then on the expenditure side, I mean, we can go through, but it, you can see a 10% increase in personnel versus increase in books and publication, kind of getting to the same number. I just want to highlight the measure C capital set aside. That's the money left over from the previous parcel tax. Measure C, that's saved for infrastructure. So 70,000 is charged against that, drawing it down to 100,000 at the end of the year.
Can I back you up just half a
Yeah,
second,
sure.
just because I'm looking at it? So the ordinance that we passed established $59 per parcel for single family residents. Multifamily residential parcel is $59 per parcel plus $10 per living unit in excess of one, up to a maximum of 1,000 per parcel. And non-residential parcels also says $59 per parcel. I'm just suggest at some point, because it's all electronic, we can send you guys a link to all of the underlying ordinances, just so you have it for back then. Okay. Anyway, sorry,
All right.
checking against my.
And did take questions after one, as you had suggested?
Sure. So library questions.
Yeah.
So I personally found it a little tricky to follow measure C flowing in and out of these measure D numbers. And I don't have a suggestion or a solution, but it took me a couple minutes to realize that they're both related to the library. So that's why they're here, I guess. But I'm wondering, and this is a question, not a recommendation necessarily, but is there a way to segregate the measure C activity from the measure D activity?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it would look like, but where it caught my eye as I was going through your detail, which I very much appreciated, and I saw spending on Godby, and they're the folks who designed the surveys that try and raise taxes, frankly. So then I read that that measure D is to maintain the hours of operations and provide services, equipment, program, materials for the library. And I thought, okay, Godby's not really any of those. But then I realized, okay, the Godby expenses are probably part of measure C, not measure D. And that's where I kind of left it.
Oh, do you mean in the detail? Oh, okay, sorry, I was.
Yeah, well, it's the Godby stuff is showing in the measure detail listing. And the expenditures, well, you've got measure C, 110,000 last year, 70,000 this year, but it's not.
Okay. Yeah, I was. Summary. Okay, yeah, in the detail, we can absolutely break those out.
Second comment, and we talked about this just a touch, that last segment of the account string, the 4-digit 9310 or 9270, which I would call account codes and you call object codes, would be helpful to have a cross-reference of the object code and the object code name. where are the equipment ones, where's the books and pubs, where are the database ones, so just a cross-reference of account number and name. Would be,
So
would be
are
good.
these opportunity levels or these categories? Okay, got it.
So those were my sort of accounting-ish questions. I have a question about next year's budget. $390,000 for equipment. What are we buying?
Which is pretty standard in libraries now, so that allows material to be checked in and sorted automatically. So that will be
Barcode scanner as books go down the,
conveyor belt. Like, was at the airport and there's an induction and it uses RFID technology. And then since we're a part of a consortium, our books are sorted into bins, and right now staff are doing that, and it's not great ergonomically, so it automatically sorts it, and then makes it a faster process.
So there'll be significant impacts to staff time, kind of freeing up staff that are now having to sort books and spend a lot of time doing that to do other kind of services and programs. And then we also have some of that funding will be going towards new furniture and kind of improved bookshelves and things like that. As part, there's a library modernization project going on that's totally separate from this, but it kind of gives us a chance to refresh some of the kind of furniture and things like that.
fair enough, and I see that even though next year we're forecast to spend $1.6 million against tax revenue of $1.1 million, deficit of $500K, you've got a existing fund balance to support that, so no financial concerns there, and it does seem like it's money spent in the right places, so that's it for my questions, I think. I don't know if you guys had other things that popped out
Go for
on
it.
the library.
Okay. I had some questions, and these come from a place of just trying to understand. So one thing that jumped out to me on the expenditure side is we can't really look at any detail for the personnel costs. It's like 80% of what we spent. It's kind of our job to make sure that the money is spent appropriately. How can we do that when we can't really look at 80% of what was spent? So I've done this before, not for city government, right? But for private industry. And you're trying to look at who it is and what they're doing and how long they're spending and when they're, booking their time. But I think that should be something maybe we at least consider as a part of this, is how we can do that.
I'll make a comment, and I'm the person in the room on staff who's least qualified to answer any of these questions, but I would just say that again, within normal use, I mean, I don't see there's no reason why you can't see the personnel costs. It's all public information, but I think to get to your point, there's two things I would say. First of all, personnel is actually a roll-up of salaries and benefits, and to the extent that overtime, so there's a breakout this way. And then and I'll defer to the library staff, there's also in the budget a certain number of full-time equivalent positions, FTEs we call them, that are allocated to all the various funding sources. So I don't think it would be problematic to say these are the FTEs that are budgeted in the particular funding source.
Yeah, that would be
And
very
these are the
helpful.
actual, just
Yeah.
so you know, unless you're going to tell me it's possible that you have people that will charge all over the place depending on what they're doing at any given time versus positions that are 20% out of this, and but we can drill down. Yeah.
I believe it all came from that amount of money, but that's not how, like, if we don't have to measure in the future, it's still like priorities, so it's not like we have another team
Right.
funded position to use.
So it's not about the person, it is the position, right? So
I think some of our positions are like, 60% Measure D, 40% general
Yeah.
fund. But there are, I think Yeah, and once, if you see the export, it's all librarian, senior library assistant, library assistant.
We could probably put
Right.
together a little
Yeah, I'm sure
summary.
you could see.
It gets a
the-
little trickier if you have, programs that are funded by these measures, and if a person is working on this program at C, or if they're working on this, but I think the way the budget works, they're allocated either all or in part. And
Yeah.
I can show you what the positions are. And personally, it is actually helpful to see kind of the salary and benefits, because it is a big piece of the budget.
Sure.
I think the position sheet would show budgeted.
Oh, I can run a report just by Fund 215.
Yeah.
Pull that out for you, be by person, by
We'll
account.
flag that
Right.
for, maybe it's like backup to one of these, because then you can see the detail.
Sure. Okay.
By position.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever PII is protected. What I'm used to is, in construction, you got a lot of jobs, and if one's underperforming and the other one, you can kind of, game the system a little bit and charge depending on how you want it to look. And so that would just be the primary consideration, is that if these are all library folks, of course, that's great. And
Can I-
You have temporary staff that get emergency as well. Those are, pages and.
Yeah, and they'll be in there. Can I just ask a question?
Substitute
Sorry,
labor.
if you're kidding, but another question that at least we're noticing on a citywide basis is there's the budgeted authorized positions, and then there's actual warm bodies that you have, because there's a lot of vacancies. And then when you look at budget to actual, we're actually seeing a fair amount of savings because of vacancies. So the library, just as a department, are you guys pretty fully staffed? Okay.
We're always between 94 and 96% staff. Right now, we have about 3 FTE, but that's just kind of standard. Go. 3 a big.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
We
think the document you gave to us yesterday, I think, we were about 90 and 290.
Maybe what would you say, here's how the library is allocated and what's in C and D.
Sure.
and Here's what the budget is, and here's how the actual.
Yeah, we don't have
Yeah.
B and C.
Yeah, that'd be great.
They're looking together.
maybe 853 is 200K short of what you would have if you had all your folks, positions filled. So, yeah.
But when you do a budget, do you assume you're fully staffed, or do you assume a vacancy rate?
I think actually Claire's.
That's under discussion. Historically, it's fully
Question.
staffed.
More library questions?
Yeah, I had a couple more. So what I tried to do is just line up these details, and thanks for providing them with, maintaining hours of operation, services, equipment, programs, and materials. So I had a couple specific to this detail here. The Godby ones jumped out to me as well. A couple $19,500 surveys. How is that? Can we just understand more about what that is?
That's for the Measure C. So that's actually not funded through Measure D, that's the Measure C capital set aside.
Okay.
So the Measure C capital set aside is that was kind of a rollover when Measure C turned into Measure D. And Measure C did have capital included in it, and Measure D does not.
Okay.
And those surveys were done, and then basically is the goal is trying to figure out how do we expand, how do we get a bigger library downtown, how do we deal with our facility efficiencies. So the Godby survey was to evaluate support for a funding measure for that.
Okay.
And there's a NBS. There's a number of things. There was Godby. NBS did a tax rate analysis for us. That was part of this, is the Measure C. Nolan Tam did some architectural costing evaluations. And then CivX, I think is their name.
That was one of my questions. as
Yeah,
well.
they did some kind of like strategic consulting for us.
And that's C.
Those are all Measure C,
Okay.
yeah.
I had a question overall, this county admin fee, 25,653. What is that?
That's just the county's charge for passing the money through. It's just
The
what they,
margin for that.
oh, no, that should be for property tax.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
So those
So-
are elected by the.
Yeah,
Part of the taxpayer money just goes to the county for admin
right.
and for. Yeah. All right, thanks for that.
Do we pay them or did they take it off the top?
They take it, but I mean, and then they report it to.
Yeah, I know, right, that we show it as a
Yeah.
cost of them, but it's.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's a lot of Amazon charges. Great, they have everything, right? It's difficult for us to understand what those are. They could kind of be for anything. There's no description on them.
No, or you have, I think, $1,000 allocated to library program, so whatever the five for performers and then the OS.
Okay, okay, that's helpful. So understanding what those are, having a key the next time would be, make that a bit easier. That's,
Can I ask another question about this, the detail report here? How is this sorted? It doesn't appear to be sorted by the last account code field, the object code. Not by date. I would think if you could sort it by
Sorry,
account code or object code,
Claire took care of that for us, so she'll have to answer.
you know, if we could sort it by object code and then subtotal those, because I'm pretty sure that what we see on this summary report ties to what's in here. I know it doesn't total, so I'm assuming the
There you
8
go.
object codes tie to the 8 entries on the report here.
It typically, no. My honest answer is that's how the system spit out the report. And I could absolutely reorganize that next time to something that's a little more logical.
I mean, if you can sort it by that account or object code, that might be more useful than.
yeah, I think we could really drill down faster if it was sorted that way, because we're not going to look too hard into the books and publication, right? It's all from one place, and there's going to be certain things we're going to want to look at.
First system database.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the default is kind of a reverse document date, but that's not.
Yes.
Is this
yeah, we
coming
can
out of,
absolutely do that
is this
next
coming out of GL or?
That's the general library.
The one, okay.
I had one more quick library one. The second line item down here, tax, TAC, ERAF, TAC 3. I'm just curious what is, maybe I should already know this, but what is that? $19,239.
So that's
Yeah,
the
the
ERAF?
detail. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's showing up as a ERAF charge and it's showing,
Can I see the detail?
oh, it's right here. So there's
so I-
2 of them in that.
Yeah.
yeah, the's two, but they don't have
Okay.
to like 30K.
Okay, yeah, so that's definitely well, you can tell by the document reference that that's actually a cash receipt. So it looks like the county sent us. I don't think that they did, but maybe they sent us the ERAF with this all in one ACH. And we're
Okay, so I
we're
see
deducting.
there's
So
3
it's-
line items, 2
we're
taxes and
crediting-
1 credit that
Yeah.
add up to the 2563.
yeah, so we're crediting the revenue, debiting the expense
Okay.
in the revenue.
All right, that's all part of that. Okay. Got it.
No, this is the voter approved tax oversight committee meeting.
Thank you.
No worries, thank you.
Thanks for visiting.
Good catch, good math. Any other library comments before we move on?
I don't have any more for that.
So what's our next
Oh,
measure to
all right.
review?
Measure G, cannabis.
Yes.
All right, so here we had, as of January 1st, we reduced our fees by 50% charging. And the personnel charges is really admin and the non-personnel. And the money that's been accumulating in this fund has been earmarked to pay for the SAFE team, which only 11,000 was needed this year. Because they were using the opioid money that we were getting as opioid settlement first. And then that's just run out at year end. And then it's 11,000 for the SAFE team. So this will be drawn down much faster in the coming fiscal year. Not reflected in that transfer out budget.
So, so I follow what you're saying, but are you saying that in fiscal 24, we would be spending money or transferring
This
money to the
transfer
state?
out will be a much higher number.
So this budget summary that we see does not reflect that transfer that you think is very likely to happen.
Yeah, well, yes,
Okay.
yes, that's exactly.
Because we have an order of funds, and this was when council approved the SAFE team, they approved kind of an order of use of funds, which is basically traditionally most restricted to least. And so we're starting with things like the opioid settlement, any other special revenue funds. After those are used up, then we will move to the cannabis funds, and after that to the general fund. And so when this budget was created, we didn't have an estimate for how much would be included from the cannabis tax, so we didn't include that in the budget. Should we get to the point where we need to use these, which we anticipate we probably will this year, then we'll go to council. We expect it mid-year and include that budget amendment for the amount that we'll need to transfer from the general fund. From the fund balance in the cannabis.
Did you say the cannabis tax is getting reduced 50%?
Yeah,
So that happened in November last year, based on feedback from the cannabis community. The city council decreased from 4% to 2%. The business tax on cannabis businesses, specifically the non-delivery retail types. So it's the only business type that they changed, but those are the vast majority of the types of businesses that we have in the revenues that the city receives. So that was cut from 42% for a 2-year period. And so that's part of the reason that the receipts are quite a bit lower. The other piece is just challenges in the cannabis market right now.
So this maybe isn't the purpose of this committee, but so if we expect to pay for the SAFE team out of this fund this year, is our budget gonna increase? It looks like it's 25K again. It's not significantly higher than.
okay, the SAFE team will be represented as a transfer out. The non-personnel, I believe, is just the software.
Software used
Okay.
to administer the cannabis.
Okay.
Safety in the general fund.
The SAFE team is held in the
The
general.
practice is to transfer to the general fund as
Yeah.
opposed to have some of the safety in charge directly.
Right, because. Yeah, well, because first of all, the opioid money was in the general fund and the ending funding source is also in the general fund.
So, but we can't really forecast, right? We don't really know be nice to see what the SAFE team plan to come out of this measure is for next year.
Yeah, I would throw out about 250,000.
You know what the safety team costs in total?
It's like 700 or something, the total. So, or maybe it's 850 with the startup costs that weren't as high as what they had anticipated.
I believe in the staff report, we actually linked, it's hard because you have a physical copy. But if you use the online version, we linked to the staff report where council approved the SAFE team, so you can actually go and see the budget for it. See the way that they structured these.
I did have obviously the same question with personnel for this one. I'm just curious. So the 25K for annual cannabis portal software subscription, what does that get us? That do?
I wish Micah was here because is that Camino or is that HDL?
Camino.
For 25K.
So I know that he just cut that, so then that,
They just determined after when they started the program, they wanted software to administer and work with businesses. I think after using the software for a few years, Micah, as economic development director and manager of the program, determined it wasn't a good use. We did institute a new module with HDL, who's also the company that manages our sales and property taxes. And so sales, property, and business license taxes as well. And so that has been a very useful tool in working with the cannabis businesses.
So is it fair to say we're replacing Camino software functionality with HDL software functionality?
I want to check with Micah before I answer, because I don't know and I don't want to misstate it.
yeah, I have not looked into either of those softwares. It's just not programmed.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm gonna just say anecdotally, when cannabis became a thing and the regulations and the ordinances, there was a lot of sort of customization of, you know, regulations of tax code and software and licensing. And I think what has happened is that as folks have matured, then cannabis in some ways just becomes another business. And so there's less of a perceived need for everything to be specialized around that cannabis. So I think the answer is probably going to be yes to a large extent, but like, we're not in a position to tell you if it's 100% covered.
We know order of magnitude, how many cannabis businesses there are in the city?
I believe there are 8. I can double check. There are a limited number of licenses that the city allows to exist, and so I believe
Right, 8 or 10, maybe a dozen, but not
Yeah.
50, not 100.
it's a very small.
Okay,
Does
so
does that include, I'm sorry,
Go
does that include delivery?
So the city only allows non-storefront delivery,
so
so there's
it's
no dispensaries that have an actual physical storefront, only delivery services. The city also has, last I checked, Micah's the expert, but last I checked, we had a manufacturing, I believe. And so there are primarily delivery non-storefront, and then a couple of manufacturing, and then I think one company has actually 2 different types of license. So they do both delivery and then I think some, let's say, storage or something like that. So there's it's all managed by the state of California, the types of licenses, and so the city just determines which ones we allow within limits.
from my perspective, it's a small number of operations, whatever the dollar amounts, but you know, you're not overwhelmed with massive numbers of small businesses here.
Well, there are a few.
There's no county admin fee on this measure?
No, because
This is a
we
business
collect the
license.
money.
This is a business
Okay.
license tax, so it's not on the property tax bill.
Okay.
It's not a property tax bill.
Okay, got it.
So that's why the parcel tax, I guess, shows up in the library, but it won't show up in sales tax and it won't show up in the business license.
Moving on.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Okay, yeah.
Well, last
Sure,
question, sorry.
sure.
So the fund balance is $1.1 million. And next year's budget says it'll be $1.1 million, although less if we do in fact spend money on the savings. Is it fair to think of that million or $1.1 million as heading towards the safe team, just question of timing, or are there other significant uses for those funds anticipated?
I would say this entire fund balance will be used, but should it expand past its pilot would, which is a 3-year term, I believe. And should it continue, it will run this entire balance.
See that in future reports then probably. Yeah, I don't have any additional cannabis questions.
No.
All right. So moving on to measure E, which is our 0.75% transaction use tax. So this one was, when it was renewed from a 0.5 cent to 0.75 cent, that extra 1/4 cent increment was called out to fund these essential facilities projects. And essentially what it's doing is servicing the debt, and with any remainder being transferred in. And this fund is holding both the proceeds of the debt and then any other funds and projects that it anyway, the project's underway in the fund. Yeah, what you can see here is basically the drawing down as the projects are completed. I think station 54 and 55 are very close to being finished, and Bobby's on the line, I think, to speak to that. And maybe any projects that might be coming up in the future.
So I do have a question here. Is why wouldn't we want to show the revenue side, the tax revenue on your summary here? We're showing some interest income, but we're not showing, was it 4-point-something million of tax revenue?
Right, to his point, so the tax revenue is received in the general fund and then transferred into the fund, so it shows up as a transfer in to the capital project fund. So that 586 is because I believe we collected just under 1.5 million in Measure E proceeds. So a third of that was less than 5 million. And then the debt service was like 4.2 million. And so that 586 is the remainder, that 1/3 of, was it 1.47 million?
No, this says Measure E was 14 million, of which
14 points.
14 million, of which essential facilities 4.3 million. I feel like maybe there's a way of just showing, Measure E raised $14 million, of which, 10 million is for the
Yeah,
general fund,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
4 million is for, just sort of show the flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be a useful thing.
Together with Measure R, considering they're so similar.
More parallel to how you showed R, yeah. So, and here's another question. Do you have a life-to-date summary? Measure E was put into place in 2014.
Or did you just put that together?
We did. Yeah.
So that's 10 years. So it's been running for 9-10 years, and it's got another 10 years to run. And so if we've been raising 4 or 5 million a year for facilities over the last 10 years, there's 40-ish. And we've got, 3 million left, or somewhere in that order of
We
magnitude.
just put that together.
Okay. That'd be interesting. I don't know that it's critical to what
We
we're
could include
doing,
it
but
'cause, well, I think two things. The way we laid it out, and Bobby actually was really helpful in putting this together for some council members, was it also gives you the fuller picture, because there was a time early on when the debt was in the essential SIP, and then now the debt is being paid out of the general fund, which is why the net. And so when you look at that history, you actually get, the full picture of the tax revenue and expenditures for Measure E, not just the essential services piece, which is Fund 420.
Yeah.
Because I do think there's a kind of a missing piece of Measure E, which is the full 3/4 cent piece, with essential facilities accounting for the 1/3 of it.
yeah, no, I'd be interested to see what the picture looks like, for the 9-10 years we've had so far. And then if we run this for another 10 years, and whatever forecast you want for sales tax revenue, but let's say it's 5 million a year, probably more than that as the economy grows. So that's another 50 million coming in over the next 10 years. Do we have a facilities master plan
Yes.
that speaks to where that 50 million might be put to use?
Yes.
Bobby, do you want to speak to some of the work that you're doing on them?
Yeah.
You're muted, sorry.
Thank you. Excuse me. So the facilities master plan was a long-term plan that the council approved, and it had 2 phases of projects. It basically evaluated our facilities, and it went out for the borders so that we can work on any kind of outdated essential buildings. And the first phase included the projects that you're probably familiar with, the Fire Station 52, which is across from Montecito and Whole Foods on 3rd, 57, which is behind the Civic Center, and Public Safety Center, which is right across the street from where you are right now. Those projects were finished in 2020, and then we reevaluated the funds available and decided that it was acceptable and we could afford the next phase, the start of the next phase. And those are the 2 projects that are going on right now, which is Fire Stations 54 and 55. 55 is on Peacock Gap, and that project is, I want to say 99% complete. We have finished the renovation of the building. Let me take a step back. The first phase, because we had all the funds available, there were tear downs and rebuild. Fire station, Public Safety Center was a lot merger and a massive project for the city, combining fire and police. And then the second phase, as the funds were kind of eroding, then we decided that the 2 fire stations, we would be able to build them only if we salvage part of what was salvageable. So the 2 fire stations are renovation. We have salvaged the apparatus structures, and then we have demolished and rebuilt the living quarters at both locations. So Fire Station 55 is complete almost. We have moved in as of March of this year. The final touches, site work, and things like that were also completed in the summer. And we're still waiting a little bit to finalize restriping and restoring the road back to what its original condition was. And then Fire Station 54, we are still completing. We're getting really, really close now. But we had a lot of unforeseen conditions there. When I said we were going to salvage the structure that was existing, it was impossible for us to know what was under that concrete. So the building was settling. There were a lot of different things that we had to overcome, and so that delayed the project a bit. And then the rains also delayed the projects a bit. So we're almost done with those projects, and that's the beginning of the second phase. And then I think Paul and the rest of my colleagues we're all gonna have to reevaluate the available funds that are left to continue with the hierarchy of the projects. The next projects would be some additional renovations to Fire Station 56. Then there is some intention to and need to renovate part of City Hall. But that all depends on the available funding. And that
Summarize a little bit that my recollection, and is that there is a master plan. It was pretty, I guess, specific as it relates to phase 1 and 2. And then it gets a little bit more vague depending on what the costs ultimately were going to be for those and what the revenue. But not unlike some of the other sales tax measures, I think part of what has helped Bobby and her team is that the sales tax revenues from Measure E has actually outpaced what the original projections were. So there's some, funding capacity there. But I think the only other project that I knew, well, it's related to when they consolidated police and fire across the street. There was some money that was spent downstairs in this building where the police department used to be located. Now it's digital services and parking. But we have a master plan we can share, and we have put together a to date summary revenue and sources by project.
I mean, I have no doubt you'll find ways to spend the next 50 million as it walks through the door over the next 10 years.
Yeah. No, remember, most of that's going to service the debt.
Well, there was bonds issued
In 2018.
How much debt is there now?
I don't remember the amount, but it's the debt service is about 4.2 to 4.3 million dollars a year. It kind of escalates up
And that will runs until 2034-ish.
till maturity.
Well,
I mean, it's basically for most of the.
okay, I'm not going to worry over the details. What you're saying is most of that 5 million a year is spoken.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't have $50 million for new projects.
We did in the past. We
But
got
as
that money
of
up
today,
front, and
looking
now
forward.
we're paying it off. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that changes the focus.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's about $3 million expected in fund balance. If you're telling us that that's around 4 and change, there might be an additional $500,000 to $1 million a year.
Okay, I thought there was going to be some money to play with, but maybe not.
We'll see. We'll bring that back to you.
And one thing I did fail to point out was if you can see, there's no transfer in from the emergency service fund this year. This is the paramedic tax. And that tax is capped out now, and expenses are growing faster than revenue. And it really can't absorb transferring into the essential facilities project anymore. Where something's going to need to be done there in the next few years. But
So I'm gonna just say this in the interest of full transparency, because we were looking at this. So the paramedics tax is, an additional voter-approved tax measure. I just brought it up earlier in the context of this committee. You know, it consolidated the prior oversight committees that were there for B and C and G and now R. So there was no oversight committee on the paramedics tax, so it's not included and hasn't never been looked at. On the other hand, it is a voter approved measure and broadly defined, the charter talks about looking at voter approved measures, so maybe there's a conversation about having some set of eyes on the paramedic tax. It's a special tax, so it's used exclusively to fund our paramedics and EMS, but it's just it's a voter approved tax, but somehow it didn't fall under the purview of any prior oversight committee. So
Is there an
just making
expiration
an
on?
observation.
Then it probably should be added. It's a good.
Well, we could, yeah, I mean, I'm again, in the interest of transparency, there's no reason, unless there's no interest or desire. It would just be a full picture of all of this. Our friends in fire might go, what? But, the issue there, just to let you know, it's kind of off topic, so I'll back up, is that, I don't believe it has a sunset, but there's a cap, and it's at its cap. So there's discussions about, you know, the sort of buying power, if you will, of the tax compared to what it was. And so there's discussions just at the early stages of what the future of that tax may or may not look like. But given that the city has a citizens oversight committee and it's one of the taxes, it's at least worth having on the radar.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that.
Any additional questions on measure E?
Yeah, I had a couple. So I was curious, for 54, you know, I'm looking at the budget here for next year. There's $2 million in other. I got to assume maybe there's some claims or unresolved change orders if there's unforeseen conditions, and I see a bunch of scheduling things for Swinnerton on here. Can Fabiola speak to that, or, you know, how's the project coming in compared to how it was budgeted?
So the original estimate was done years ago. And
Bobby, before you go to that detail that you just shared in our finance group, let me just be very, because I think you're asking two different questions. At least because there's the current budgets to complete 55 and 54 and where we're at with the budget. My understanding is that the 2 million that's in the 23-24 budget is not actually you know, claimed or identified on a specific project. So this is not additional money for 54, 55. This was just a placeholder for what the next projects in the essential facilities plan might entail.
Okay.
Because we kind of asked that question. So I just want to clarify that the 2 million that we're showing in the 23-24 budget, I don't know if that was your question, is unrelated to the fire station.
It is. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. But Bobby, you can go back to where you're at with the fire station.
yeah, no, I'm glad you're clarifying that, because I mean, it's kind of coincidentally $2 million, but no, I understand what you are saying. I understood the question differently.
Let's simplify it. Let's do one at a time here. Is there any claims that are outstanding or unresolved change orders for any of the fire station projects?
So as of today, I think that the budget that you're seeing, we have been projecting everything that we know as of today with, you know, with the information that we have. I think we're covered. We are having some issues with the contractor. They have not filed an intent to file a claim. They haven't noticed us on any of that. And I think depending on their bottom line, I mean, it's exposed any time, but as of today, we don't have an indication that they are going to file a claim.
Okay. So showing $0 in FY 23 and 24 for fire station 54 and 55 is accurate.
Okay, no, but here's what this is, thank you. This is also worth clarifying. Going back to a comment at the very beginning of the meeting, the budget for the current fiscal year is in excess of the 2.9 million that was spent as of June. And so as we're closing the books and seeing what is needed to complete the project, some budgeted dollars that are in 22-23 are likely to kind of roll over. So some of the fund balance that you're showing in these numbers may end up being utilized in the completion of the project as we're closing out the project
Okay.
within the project budget. So if you add up these two, as I said, I think we just did the budget adjustment. It's going to be about 6 million, 6.1, and this is showing 5.9.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on measure E? Okay, we are obligated also. I'm sorry.
I've probably done enough. There's some individual line items, but it's all for the fire stations or the building across the street. So
It's fair game. Not trying to cut you off.
no, not at all. I appreciate
Actually,
it.
the questions are helpful because it helps us better, present, prepare, anticipate the information. Thank you, guys. So, right. It is helpful to hear.
Yeah, what caught your eye?
No, that's mostly it. I'm passionate about ways to save money on construction projects. Right, that's what I do. So it'd be great to advocate for the city to set ourselves up to not have to spend money we don't have to. But no, I'm good with the rest of it.
I will just tell you, interestingly, one of the, just on that note, Fabi, I cannot do justice to what you were presenting the other day, where she was about to say, when they first went out to bid on these projects, they came in way over the estimates. And they rejected the bids and then came back and did some, rescoping and redoing it. And then I think the second time went out was about $1 million and change under what the previous one was. So my sense is that there's a shared interest in doing that.
Sure.
And I don't envy Fabi, because I'll just tell you, especially with some of these essential facilities, when you get into public safety, the wants and the wish and the bells and whistles
Sure.
are just additive.
Yeah.
And having a really robust conversation about what's really needed versus what would be nice to have just because there's funding.
Yeah.
Is always a interesting
Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah.
Not to mention the rules that we have in local government and public bidding and public works contract,
Sure.
prevailing wage and everything else, so.
Yeah.
But.
Well, it was $1.8 million. I'm very happy about that. That we didn't pay. We didn't really, we didn't spend that. We got a lot more for our money, just waiting and changing the scope. So big number there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Should we go on to
Measure R, there's
the
really
greatest?
to say here, other
It is
than
what it is.
$4.8 million.
Are you transferring 100% of that to the general fund?
It's received in the general fund, it's spent in the general fund, and I can't show you what it was spent on, but.
But it is in the general fund, so you have successfully kept the money in the general fund.
We have.
I think that's all we're supposed to do with that one.
Yes. Interesting, how do you do like site of? Just the. Bigger.
Yeah, I don't want to see that spreadsheet.
I do.
It's really big, it's a matrix.
Yeah, work on it.
Okay. Okay, so have we completed the review of the staff reports?
I had a question about the options, the approved report with amendments. What would that mean?
Let me try to answer that question. So two things. That's kind of a standard template that we have on all of our reports and council reports, which is there's a recommendation in this case to receive the report through the report. Usually we'll put in options, which is you cannot approve the report. Or if we found out something and there was numbers that were off, we could, modify it. My thought is that this is kind of all in draft because we are going to bring you a final audited report, which will say a lot of the same information in the narrative, but we will take the questions and requests and kind of give you the supplement. And I think the question for me is, will you be comfortable, accepting that report and then doing your, for your purposes and reporting out to the city council and the community. So it's just more of a term of art, which we put in every report, but it may not be.
Then that being said, I just want to just reiterate, the biggest thing, at least for me, would be the personnel costs. So since it's such a large chunk of those.
We go to making a motion to open public comment.
Okay.
I believe that this, I want to make sure we're doing all the things statutorily required. So I'll just say to comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. If commenting by phone, please press *9. Once you hear a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Each speaker has 2 minutes to provide public comment and will be muted once time has elapsed. At this time, I see no public comment.
I could make a motion to approve the report.
I will request that someone make a
Oh,
motion
man.
to approve the report. Anyone care to?
I'll
move?
make a motion to approve the report. Yes.
So a roll call of,
Chair Broadman,
I approve.
Chair Freedy,
I approve as well.
Member McWaters.
I approve.
That motion passes 3-0. And then
So before we adjourn, are there any other items, upcoming meetings we have talked about? Reviewing the audited numbers, which will be likely in this November, December?
I'm supposed to bring it the second meeting in November, so it'll be in November probably.
So the council calendar has the auditor presenting the citywide audit to the council at the end of November. We'll probably have an opinion.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we don't need to necessarily wait for that, but it'll probably be good to do it in November before you get into Thanksgiving. Is there a timeline for the committee to present their report?
my understanding is it's just annually, and so I think there's some flexibility if the report needs to go to council mid-year. That's my best understanding.
So it's just once a year, not by.
Not by calendar.
Yeah, I guess the question is it, we're in a position to maybe pencil in a November meeting date that we could shoot for and get back to you if it has to slide, or you wanna wait until you have a good indication of when?
I think we'll hit it. I mean, we've been doing the second meeting in November or something
For the council.
for the audit council. And yeah,
So middle of November works.
Yeah.
Schedule it. Sure. Meeting date.
Yep.
Yeah, I suggest we aim for that, and if for some reason that doesn't work, we can shift, but let's aim for November.
And just information, this is just pieces I'm piecing together. You mentioned at the beginning that there's also a vacant position. I think the council is going to be interviewing folks in October. It's possible that there may be a 5th member appointed, but we should proceed with that date. We have one, bring them up to speed and go from there.
So, and a new member would be approved or brought in at that next meeting.
If they get through the process.
Assuming there's one that's been identified.
Would be good.
If there's nothing else,
So you'll know, actually, leaving the city of San Rafael, I've accepted a role with another agency. So this is my last meeting, supporting you. As a committee. I've really enjoyed working with you all. But you are in excellent hands with Paul and Sean. So I'm going to city hall to read them. So
They're lucky to have you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. It's a great committee. It's been a joy working with you all. And so
I just met you.
I know.
Yeah.
I I know, timing of these things is hard, but, Paul and Sean are some leaders, and I think,
That's an open FTE slot. There'll be some personnel savings for a period of time.
Yeah, because it takes forever, senior management. And I was gonna say, just the way it's set up now with this new committee is it supported through the finance department, but we continue to endeavor to have some of the operational folks here that can speak to specifics that's going on programmatically.
It's very helpful.
Yeah.
But
Does the city have money to pay recruiting fees? Like, would you use a recruiting agency to find a skilled staff person?
Particularly for director positions, you see, I maybe that's because that's where the number's big.
the answer is yes, and like you said, I position through a recruitment, other positions, there is conversation about the labor market's really tough for some of the positions that and vacancies that we have, so there's really conversations about how much do you invest in recruiting for positions? Because, an office assistant is different than a management analyst or a finance manager, or finance director.
I think you should consider large retention bonuses for the remaining staff. Just a suggestion.
Which measure do you think? No, retention, I'm glad you mentioned that, because recruitment and retention.
So is this still part of the meeting minutes at this point? We need. Okay, I think we can adjourn this meeting. Thanks everyone for your attendance and good questions and feedback from staff. Thank you.
Yeah,
Feedback.
November.
yeah.
Right, thank you.